Hi, my name is Abu Francis. In this talk, I want to explain a little bit about how knowledge gets developed in our field of architecture. Now, when we talk about knowledge in any field, you broadly get two kinds of types of information. One would be what is known as descriptive claims. Descriptive claims are basically descriptions of whatever that subject matter is. And the second would be what are known as normative claims. Like, for example, I can hold up this mouse and I'll say that it's black in color, it's got this shape, and this is a 3D model of it, and this is how it looks, and this is the final result which is there after we designed. So that's in product design. I mean, that's just a set of descriptions. A normative claim would be things like, I think this mouse could have been improved. Maybe the hold is not nice, and if I was the designer, I may even say that I was attempting something else, but that didn't work out because the mold didn't come in time, and I had no choice but to end up making this particular whatever. So when you face normative claims, those are called normative claims because you're making quality statements. You are saying that this is nice and this problem was there and that problem was there. Then the audience has got much richer information about what to do and how to position that particular whatever that field may be. This happens in every field, whether it is in product design or music or art or science. It's nothing to do with it happens only in one field, it won't happen in the other field. It happens in all the fields. So the curious thing about architecture is that when we talk about our buildings and our designing, most of us are involved mainly in the empirical evidence, the thing which you can touch and see over there. That's that building over there. Everything else is theory, Okay, fine. I mean, let's not talk about the building only. Let's also talk about these drawings and all. But what are these drawings? Nothing in the drawing will, come up and shout and say that this is good and that is good or whatever. I mean, what do you go by? You finally end up with a bunch of descriptions. So there's a huge amount of descriptive claims, and there are very little normative claims. And normative claims should ideally be made by that particular inventor. After all, architects are inventors. We invent things. We are trained inventors. We do new things. Okay. And look at the peculiarity of our field. We are continuously inventing. Every project is a new invention. But we end up making descriptive claims at the end of it, and then we go away. Now somebody else looking at those descriptive claims, we all got curious minds, and so we put theories on top of it and say maybe this particular thing, that's what he really wanted to do. Frankly, a lot of us don't cross-check and go back to that original author. Sometimes it's not possible. You can't go back to the original author of the Egyptian pyramids, for example. But often, even for regular accessible architects or architects who are alive and then their buildings are there, and they do become famous. Many of these buildings do become famous. Some of them do become famous at least. And others want to become famous and may not have the means and mechanisms to get those their work in the limelight. Whatever be the case, but we don't really do that exercise of saying, okay, get that original author here and let me hear from the horse's mouth all the normative claims which need to be understood. Now, why is this important? Unless you have somebody sticking their neck out and saying that this is good and that is bad and this I tried and that I tried and after that I got the design, you are not really making great advancements, and you can't learn lessons from one area and then bring it into another area. To another project, right? You will end up with a lot of mystery, and I call this a kind of silo thinking that we architects do. Each architect works out a design all right, maybe has put in a lot of effort also to make those designs, but then you'll leave a huge set of descriptions and very little in terms of normative claims. Now, normative claim and descriptive claims are the two broad divisions which epistemologists talk about. Epistemology is a branch of philosophy which explains how knowledge gets built. So it's not a new theory I'm proposing. It is something which generally epistemologists do agree upon. And there are subtle, there are some. It's pretty interesting to understand what epistemology is, and at a broad level, on how claims are made and how to check whether those claims they are made, like, are they true? Can they be verified? So there's a fair amount of intense things over there. But let me get back to this issue about having this huge amount of descriptive claims and the kind of dangers this leads to. Let me give you one example of a much quoted example in colleges when we teach. A lot of teachers want to talk about famous buildings, and one of the buildings which usually gets mentioned even in India is the Sydney Opera House, and it is quite a magnificent structure. I am not trying to say that it is not, but we have got perceptions of those descriptive. That's a building over there. It looks nice and it looks like the sails and this and that, and it's kind of Chinese whispers. By the time whatever which Jon Utzon had done and how it finally reached that young teacher in a college who's explained to even younger students over there, there are lots of things which have got lost in the translation. For example, how many of us really know that Jon Utzon almost did not win that project at all? When that competition was finalized, not awarded, and the jury was sitting together, I think they had some really impressive architects on the jury. I think Eero Saarinen was one of the jurors, if I remember my sources correctly. And Jon Utzon's work was actually not discarded. I mean, somewhere I read that it was thrown into the waste paper basket. I don't think it must have happened like that, because they could not agree on which architect's design to be awarded. So they finally, somebody said, oh, let's relook at what Jon Utzon had done, and they found some merit in it and it got awarded. But the story didn't end there. When that particular project started, and Jon Utzon was actually in Australia coordinating with the people who were constructing that building and all that, he had a lot of hassles with the contractors, and the project got delayed and stretched, and they made some approximations which he didn't like, and he got pretty annoyed. In fact, he got so annoyed that the story goes that he swore that he is not going to return back to Australia, and he left Australia in a huff and a puff. Now, a lot of such things happen in all projects. I'm not saying that he leaving Australia is a big part of this whole epistemology or whatever, but the thing is that these subtle nuances of how that project came about is not the same as saying that here is a great building, what a great designer and what a great architect. The curious thing about that particular project is, I was reading an article in some newspaper a few years back that they actually got the original drawings of Jon Utzon, and they actually modeled it for the acoustics. And it turns out that the reason why he left in a huff and a puff is because they actually changed the geometry here and there to suit their construction requirements, the people who are the contractors there. And he got very annoyed, and truly the drawings which he had made were quite different from what actually got made. I mean, superficially they were similar. They all had the shell roofs and all that, but the shells were parts of a sphere which Jon Utzon was doing, whereas the shells which got made had certain approximations and distortions. You can check up the original sources. I'm just broadly explaining this. But they modeled the original drawings which Jon Utzon had made, and then they found that its performance acoustically was much better than what the Sydney Opera House eventually had. In fact, Sydney Opera House had a lot of acoustic issues, and they had to keep rectifying it, and then there were issues of sight lines and things like that. And so there are lots of nuances, lots of ifs and buts, and maybe this part of that famous building is not right, or that part of it is not right. These are all very important points. These are all normative claims which need to be told to our students, and but we don't. We are so biased towards making drawings and getting impressed by the drawings. In fact, talking about any rebellion towards technical drawings or the act of drawing is actually considered sacrilege by many architects. Now, mind you, I'm not trying to put a strawman argument here. I am also fond of sketching. I love sketching, and I do sketch, and I do like making drawings and all that. But that's for its own merits, not really because I want to conflate that with how architecture needs to be expressed. Now, we have been using methods and techniques discovered in the Renaissance. That's 600 years back. All the famous guys there, the Renaissance people, Michelangelo and Brunelleschi especially, and many people of that era, they did exemplary work, and they were the ones who discovered how you can do descriptive geometry and do projections and get plans and elevation sections, single point perspective and 2-point perspective. All that happened during that era. It was a rich era where there was a lot of crosstalk between different types of fields, between musicians and mathematicians and architects and all. There were some rich families. They used to conduct kind of a house party where they used to deliberately bring in these different intellectuals from different areas, and that milieu was so conducive for experimentation. In fact, the internet today is somewhat like that, if you really want to look at it that way. But 600 years later, we are still sitting down and making so many descriptive claims, and our normative claims are all some kind of weird warped heuristics, and like I said, Chinese whispers handed over from ages, and poorly read books, and even the authors, they become effusive in their writing rather than really clear about how this project needs to be explained. And there is another angle to it. It's not just the building design which needs to be explained, which is out there, but the whole process by which you led to the building also needs to be known. So what I am proposing, and the reason I've been working on TAD and my software, is not really the software itself, but what I call as AIM, Architecture Information Modeling. We need to really start understanding that if we have to make some sense of whatever work which we are doing, we can't just be doing descriptive claims. Now, one way of looking at descriptive claims are all these models which we create. That is also a descriptive claim. They're just descriptions, right? Maybe not as a drawing, but not even as a physical model. I'm talking about a computer model. And if you really dig deeper, architecture is one of the fields where you need to remodel the same thing again and again. So for acoustics, you have another modeling software and a modeling system. For energy, you have another one. For looking at the building and how it looks and rendering, you have a third one. I mean, it's crazy. Nobody is sitting down and debating this, that the thing has become so fragile, and all our debates and discussions on what we really need to do as architects, we are left with, bits and pieces of people's individual silos. Okay. So we need to really start thinking and debating how do we talk about the entire architecture information modeling process. And TAD is the consequence of this kind of thinking, where I was fortunate enough to figure out that there are some ways in mathematics very simple ways actually, where you can classify the elements which you're making and the volumes which we architects are doing in such a manner that you can get really interesting central modeling system from where you can spin off acoustic modeling and energy modeling and visualization and what have you. So this is a topic which needs to be out there amongst all architects, and we need to really sit down and ask that where do we go from here? Can we just keep making descriptive claims all the time? So that's a broad topic which I wanted to address in a very simple and hopefully not so crude manner. And so this is all about how epistemologically we should start understanding the richness of and the intricacy of what our field is. We're not really rising up to the challenge there. We are so caught up into seeing, I want to talk about that building over there. Oh, but who's going to talk about the process? And who's going to talk about the representation of the process? You take cooking, for example. If somebody said that, okay, I'm not interested in the recipe and all that, that's all theory. Okay, I just want to see the dish and I want to eat the dish. The proof of the pudding is in the eating and things like that. Well, I mean, people do write recipes, right? And there are lots of ingredients in the recipe which are missing in the final thing. It has got evaporated, it has got vaporized, right? I mean, something which was hard as rice, okay, hard rice grains, when you cook some nice dish like biryani or something, when it gets cooked, it will be nice and soft. Now, if all we had discussions or descriptions of that, with no quality statements about it, if we added a little bit more saffron, that would have tasted better. But you don't make such statement. You say this is a biryani. That's it. This is what it is. Now you decide what you want to interpret from this. I mean, yeah, we will always whether we like it or not. We are going to interpret, right? But if there is a way by which we can talk about all this in a structured manner, we do a better job for our future generations. I mean, today the world has become crazy because all architects are offering our descriptive claims, and we are at the leading edge of causing a lot of harm to the world around us. Right? You talk about energy issues, you talk about global warming, you talk about carbon dioxide, carbon footprint. I mean, you name it. And buildings and architecture has got a major part in all of them. And yet we are not sitting down and debating this. So I hope this will let you take a look at what TAD is. TAD is a free design system which I've been working on for quite some years.